Denise Cooper, and this is Art Books Life. I'm going to talk a little bit about Mao's Last Dancer, written by Li Cunxin. I tried. I hope I said it right. Anyway, this is a really good book. This is a book that is full circle. This is nonfiction. This is Li Cunxin's life. I am talking from the beginning when he's a child of seven sons in China, communist China, under Chairman Mao. And he becomes an amazing prima ballerina. Or can you say prima ballerina for a man? Anyway, I thought about who I would really love to recommend this book to. And while I was reading it, I'm thinking Black Girl Magic, Aisha, I'm sorry, from Skinny Girl Fat Hair, because she's a ballerina. And Li, man, he talks about the ballet so much in this book, and he also marries a ballerina later on in this book. This book is one of the most full circle nonfiction books I've ever read. And most nonfictions are pretty well rounded, and sometimes they leave you hanging a little bit about, like, what happened now? I mean, where are they now? And what's going on? He doesn't leave out anything, you guys. He talks about his childhood and the starvation under communist Chairman Mao's rule, and how the family had this little tiny plot of land to basically grow their own food on, and the communists took 60% of it. Leaving the family with the rest, and how they had to dry yams out all over the city, you know, on the roofs or whatever, and run around and get them if it was going to start raining. He was so sick of eating yams, and I'm thinking, wow, they needed some butter, some brown sugar, and a whole host of other things to put on those yams, but they didn't have it. One of the things in his childhood that got me is, of course, it reminded me of my childhood. Now, he's like maybe 5 years, I think 4 years older than me. So in the 60s, this was going on. And, you know, coming up in the 70s as a young man living in China, he was plucked out of his elementary school to become a ballet dancer. The communists sent some communist people just working right under Chairman Mao, and he assigned his wife to be a part of this arts ballet. I tried to do this video. Anyway, while reading this book, I said it was full circle, and it truly is. It goes from the beginnings of his life, from the starvation to being chosen to be a representative of China's ballet by Chairman Mao's wife, who's the head of this ballet, and all the teachers that he went through. Some of the teachers who, during this communist reign, as Mao was becoming more famous and it was more brainwashing seemed to be going on, and if the teachers kind of disagreed or taught in a way that they didn't like, they were seriously taken from being a teacher to a janitor in front of the kids and the other teachers, just to shame them. And so I'm telling you, just the way that he grew up and the brainwashing that was going on about other countries, especially America, to them, about, you know, of course they, in their minds, America's just killing black people. And at the 60s, well, they weren't allowed to get the information for themselves as to what was going on. They got this information only from the Communist Party. They were not allowed to read Western literature, newspapers, anything that came in from the outside world. They were only given the information by the Communist Party. So they thought that America was destitute and everybody was starving and killing each other and so forth and so on, and it was just the most terrible country in the world. And so as he's coming up and starving and seeing all these people die, and his family is just really, they have the best. I'm telling you, it's an amazing story of how his mother and father just held on and took care of all those children. And then, of course, as time goes on, they're not allowed to have so many kids. And so his family really was blessed to have these 7 sons. And one of them, they actually sent to an uncle and aunt, one of the parents' brother, and they raised that son as their own. And so they still had 6 sons at home. And then Li gets taken to represent China and the ballet, right? And I'm telling you, what they did to test these little kids for the ballet, it's not like they were dancing before. They were just simply going to mold them little bodies into the best ballet dancers that China could mold. And so they took them out in the hallway and stretched their little bodies, and some of them were wincing and crying, and Li was just trying to hold on and make his family proud, and they tore his hamstrings by lifting his legs up to see how far he could stretch. Literally ended up tearing both of his hamstrings. And this little kid, I mean, he's just in grade school, and they took them off to basically teach them, excuse me, again, to be the best ballet dancers to represent China. And I thought about Aisha from Skinny Girl, Fat Hair, Miss Black Girl Magic, and I thought, man, she would enjoy this book, because later on, as he gets into talking about dance and ballerina and the ballerinas that he danced with, and you know they're going to mention Baryshnikov. They actually let them watch a Baryshnikov film in the communist ballet school, which was kind of, you know, shocking to them a little bit, because they did not want them to have any Western or outside influences by any other country, because they didn't want to basically get their hopes up that they could be free somewhere else. And so they didn't get to read literature, newspapers, or listen to anything else that was not, you know, run by the political party there. And then he goes into the loneliness that he had to contend with when he was in school, along with the other children that were in the ballet school, and how he missed their families and so forth and so on. And then as he's getting better and better and better, because he really wasn't that good at first, but they're molding these kids, and I mean, if that's all that they're living and breathing and teaching you, you're going to become good. So then you kind of question, you know, do I have the talent to do this, or is it just through perseverance and hard work and a slap in the head? So he becomes a famous, amazing dancer and represents China very well, so much so that they let him go to the United States to represent China, right? He gets there and he's in Houston, Texas, right? And this is where Ben comes into play. Ben is a choreographer that constantly goes back and forth to China, and he has this thing with China where he wants to have, you know, Americans come over and perform in China because he loves China, from what he gets to see in Beijing. He doesn't know about Li and his, you know, his village and all the starvation and so forth, and so I'm sure he knows, but his main focus, of course, is getting the best of the best dancers and for his dance company. So Li goes to America, and he sees all this industrialization and just freedom from how people are acting, and just sticks his head out the window at one point and just lets the breeze hit him. Like, he needs this. You can tell, it's like, oh my God, he's gonna get the bug. He ends up defecting, and some of the people that helped him in this book were, at the time, Vice President Bush, George Bush, the older one, and Barbara Bush. And there's even a picture of Li in this book with Barbara Bush, and how it talks about how nice she was to him. And when he was defecting, the Vice President Bush at the time even wrote a letter to help get Li's parents over to America after he defected and came, start, you know, dancing. And the parents were flown over. They had never been on a plane, just like Li had never been on a plane before, and they got to come to America to see their son dance. And as they're coming into this big, beautiful place where Li's dancing on stage, they even held the performance. It was supposed to start at a certain time, but they wanted the parents to get in there to see him from start to finish. So the whole audience, when these two Chinese parents come through, I mean, I literally was like, oh my God, this is so much, this is amazing, that they applauded them like they were the dancers. But, you know, everybody had known his story at the time, because it was all in the paper. This Chinese ballet dancer defected, and he's staying in America, and, you know, it was just, it's a full circle story. You get to learn about his wife, and then another wife later on, and then his children. He gets to go back home to China after not being able to for so long. His parents visit him again. I mean, he gives them money. I mean, he's really taking care of his family, and it's a blessing that he had to go through all of this. He considers it a blessing. He's an amazing man. I have never, ever read a story that just made me just want to meet this person, and to know that he was right here in Texas, of course, and just states away from where I grew up. And now I'm living here in Texas. This was amazing, and I can't say that enough, but yeah, it was. Now he's living in Australia with his beautiful wife and children, and she was a ballerina too. He married a ballerina, and Aisha, you got to read this book. You really do. It's Mao's Last Dancer. That's all I'm going to say. It's a full circle book. You guys, when you read this book, you'll even go past the page. When he finishes the book, you're already like in tears. At least I was. You're already in tears that it was so perfect that he told us about all his brothers and the wives and the kids and everything, and just how everything just came together and worked out perfectly after the hell he had gone through. It just works. And then he goes on to talk about his life in Australia and what he's doing now. I've watched interviews, I've watched pieces of Mao's Last Dancer, and some people say it was a worse movie, but they need to then read the book. This is a great read. I'm so glad I bought it, and I kept looking at it going, I gotta read this book before this year ends. And so I'm so happy that I did. Hope you will find it as enjoyable as I did. Bye, you guys.